The quiet room, the beeping of the machines was steady, each sound echoing like a reminder that life is fragile. Keanu Reeves lay in the hospital bed, his body weak, his mind lost between memories and pain. The room was white, too bright, too cold. Outside the window, the city moved as if nothing had changed. But for Keanu, time had slowed. Every breath felt heavier than the last. He had always been the man who kept going, who faced loss and kept walking, who carried pain quietly without asking the world for pity. But now, lying in this bed, stripped of strength he could not hide, the silence around him forced him to confront every shadow he had tried to bury. Hours passed with nurses coming and going, checking his pulse, adjusting the wires, offering polite smiles that barely touched the silence. Visitors were few. Keanu had never been the kind of man to surround himself with crowds. He valued solitude, and in this moment solitude seemed to have claimed him completely. But then the door opened softly, and footsteps broke the stillness. Keanu turned his head and his breath caught. It was Sandra Bullock. She walked in slowly, her eyes filled with concern, her hands trembling just slightly as she carried a small bag of flowers. Their history was complicated. Two people whose lives had crossed in ways the world admired, who shared memories of laughter, of friendship, of moments when they could lean on each other. The years had passed and life had carried them in different directions, but now here she was, standing in his hospital room, looking at him with eyes that saw past the fame, past the silence, past the pain. Keanu tried to smile, but his lips trembled. His voice cracked as he whispered, "You came." Sandra set the flowers on the table beside his bed and moved closer. "Of course I came," she said gently. "You don't have to go through this alone." Those words pierced through him like light breaking into darkness. He had been carrying so much for so long. Loss, grief, loneliness, and hearing her speak with such warmth broke down the wall he had built around his heart. For years he had taught himself to stay strong, to hold his pain quietly, to never let the world see him fall. But in this moment, as Sandra sat beside him and reached for his hand, the strength he had carried for so long finally cracked. His eyes filled with tears, and before he could stop himself, he broke down. The man who had faced tragedy with silence, who had walked through storms without complaint, now wept openly. Sandra squeezed his hand, her own eyes shining with tears, and whispered, "It's okay. You don't always have to be strong." The weight of those words crushed him and freed him at the same time. For the first time in years, Keanu allowed himself to feel without holding back. The hospital room, once cold and empty, now carried something else. Connection. It was fragile, unexpected, and deeply human. Sandra stayed quiet, letting him release what he had hidden. She did not interrupt, did not try to fix the pain. She was simply there, present, a reminder that even the strongest souls need someone to lean on. In that moment, Keanu realized something he had forgotten. Kindness is not only about what you give to others, but also about allowing yourself to accept it when it is offered. The walls began to fall. The room was quiet except for the beeping of the machines and the sound of Keanu's uneven breaths. Sandra sat beside him, her hand still holding his, her eyes studying his face with a mix of sorrow and strength. She had known him for many years, had shared laughter on sets, secrets in quiet moments, and the kind of trust that comes rarely in life. But she had never seen him like this. Vulnerable, raw, stripped of the calm mask he usually wore for the world. Keanu wiped his tears with the back of his hand, embarrassed by his own breaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I don't usually—" His voice trailed off. Sandra shook her head gently. "Don't be sorry. You've carried too much alone for too long. Sometimes breaking down is the bravest thing you can do." Those words settled into him like truth he had been running from. All his life he had believed strength meant silence. He thought resilience was about never letting the cracks show. But now, in the stillness of the hospital room, he realized resilience could also mean allowing yourself to feel, to admit that the pain was heavy. Sandra leaned back in her chair, her voice soft but firm. "I know what people see when they look at you. They see the strong man, the kind man, the quiet one who never lets the world see him fall. But I also know that behind all of that, you're human. You hurt, you bleed, and you deserve to be cared for too." Keanu looked at her, his eyes searching, his voice low. "Sometimes I feel like I don't deserve it. Too many people I loved are gone. It feels like life keeps taking." His words hung in the air, heavy with grief. He thought of the tragedies that shaped him, of love lost and dreams shattered, of the loneliness that became his silent companion. He had walked through those storms without asking for help. but inside the wounds never healed. Sandra reached over, brushing her thumb gently across his hand. Loss doesn't mean you don't deserve love. Pain doesn't make you unworthy of care. If anything, it makes you more human. And being human means you don't have to carry everything alone. For a moment, Keanu closed his eyes. Her voice wrapped around him like warmth against the cold. He remembered the days they had worked together, the laughter that came so easily, the comfort of knowing someone understood him without judgment. Now, sitting beside his hospital bed, she felt like an anchor in waters he had been drowning in silently. He whispered, "I thought I was fine. I thought I could keep going like always. But when I woke up in this room, I realized how tired I am. Not just my body, but my soul." Sandra's eyes filled with tears, but she stayed strong for him. "Then let someone be here for you. Let me be here. You don't always have to fight alone." Her words broke another wall inside him. For so long he had given kindness to the world but rarely allowed himself to receive it. Now, for the first time in years, he let someone else carry a piece of his burden. As the night deepened, they sat together in silence. But it was not the cold silence of loneliness. It was the healing silence of connection, of two souls sharing the same fragile space. Shadows of the past, the hospital lights dimmed as night settled over the city. Keanu lay back against the pillows, his body tired but his mind restless. Sandra stayed beside him, her presence steady like a quiet flame that refused to go out. For hours they barely spoke, but the silence between them was not heavy anymore. It felt alive, filled with unspoken truths. At one point, Keanu turned his head and whispered, "Do you ever feel like life keeps testing you?" His voice cracked as though he was afraid of his own question. Sandra nodded slowly. "Yes, but I think sometimes the tests aren't to break us. Maybe they're to show us how much we can still give even when we're hurting." Her words lingered in the room, pressing against the walls Keanu had built around himself. He thought about the people he had lost, the child who never had a chance to live, the woman he once loved who was taken too soon, the many friends who had left this world too early. Every memory felt like a scar carved into his soul, and yet, sitting here with Sandra, he realized those scars were also proof that he had survived. His eyes watered again. But this time he did not hide. "Sometimes I wonder why I'm still here when so many I loved are not. It feels unfair." Sandra leaned closer, her gaze firm yet tender. "Because you still have something to give. Because your kindness matters to people you may not even realize. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't surviving loss, it's choosing to live after it." Keanu closed his eyes, her words sinking into him. For years he had been carrying his grief like a shadow he could never escape. He gave kindness to strangers. He gave respect to everyone, but he never gave himself permission to heal. Tonight, Sandra's presence was forcing him to confront what he had avoided for so long. He remembered the moments when the loneliness was strongest. Sitting on benches alone, walking city streets with no destination, eating meals in silence. The world admired him for being humble, for being grounded, but they did not see the emptiness he carried inside. And now, for the first time, someone was looking directly at that emptiness and refusing to let him hide it. Sandra gently brushed his hair from his forehead. "You've spent so much time giving. Maybe it's time to let someone give back." Her words broke something inside him again, but in a softer way. He felt the walls he had built around his heart begin to crumble, not with force, but with care. "I don't know how," he admitted. "I don't know how to let someone close without being afraid of losing them." Sandra's smile was sad but strong. "You don't have to know. You just have to start, one step at a time. I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to walk with you." The machines beeped softly. The city lights glowed faintly outside. And in that fragile moment, Keanu realized that maybe healing was not about erasing the past. Maybe it was about finding someone who could stand with you in the shadows until you were ready to see the light again. The turning point, morning sunlight poured through the hospital blinds, warm but sharp. Keanu opened his eyes slowly, the weight of another restless night still heavy on him. Beside his bed, Sandra was asleep in the chair, her head resting against her arm. She had stayed through the night without complaint, her quiet presence guarding him in the darkness. For a moment, Keanu simply watched her, his heart caught between gratitude and fear. No one had stayed like this for him in a long time. No one had seen his brokenness and chosen to remain anyway. It scared him because it made him realize how much he needed it, how much he longed for someone to stay. When Sandra stirred awake, she smiled sleepily at him. "You're still here," she whispered. Keanu gave a faint smile. And so are you. They shared a silence that said more than words could. Then Keanu spoke, his voice low and hesitant. Sometimes I feel like I don't know how to live anymore. I keep moving, I keep smiling, but inside I'm tired. I'm so tired. Sandra leaned forward, her expression soft but firm. You don't have to have all the answers right now. It's enough that you're here breathing, choosing to keep going. Healing doesn't come in one day. It comes in small steps. Keanu looked away, his eyes filling again. What if I'm afraid to take those steps? What if I fall again? She reached out and touched his hand. Then you get up again. And if you can't get up, someone will help you. Maybe me, maybe someone else. But you don't have to walk alone anymore. Her words struck deep, breaking through layers of fear he had hidden for years. For so long he had convinced himself that he was meant to walk alone. That loss had left him with no other choice. But now, looking at Sandra, he wondered if maybe he had been wrong. Maybe walking alone had been a decision, not a destiny. The nurse entered quietly, checking his vitals, smiling politely before leaving again. When the door closed, Keanu turned back to Sandra. His voice was barely above a whisper. You make me feel like it's okay to be weak. Sandra shook her head gently. You're not weak. You're human, and humans are allowed to feel. Those words settled in him like a balm, soothing a wound he never thought could be touched. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of possibility. Not that the pain would vanish, but that he could live alongside it without being crushed. As the day passed, they talked more. Not about fame, not about movies, but about life, about fear, about the weight of grief. Sandra listened without judgment, offering her presence more than advice, and Keanu, for the first time, allowed himself to speak truths he had buried so deeply. When evening came, he looked at her and said softly, You didn't have to come, but you did, and it changed everything. Her eyes filled with quiet emotion. I came because I care. Sometimes the simplest reason is the truest. Keanu's chest tightened, but it was not the old pain. It was something new, something like hope, fragile but alive. The first step forward. The next day was brighter, the kind of morning that made the world outside look alive. Keanu sat up slowly, his body still weak, but his spirit felt lighter than it had in months. Sandra entered with a gentle smile, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She placed one on the table near his bed and said softly, I remembered how you always take it. Black, no sugar. Keanu looked at her, surprised by the small detail. You still remember? He asked. Of course, she said simply. Some things you don't forget. Her words settled in the space between them, quiet but powerful. Keanu wrapped his hands around the warm cup, staring into the steam as if it carried answers. For so long he had avoided letting anyone get this close, but now the walls around him were thinner and Sandra was already inside. He spoke after a long pause, his voice careful. I don't know how to start again. I don't know how to let myself live without feeling like I'm betraying the people I lost. Sandra listened, her eyes soft but steady. You're not betraying them by living. You're honoring them. Every breath you take, every act of kindness, every moment you choose to keep going, it's a way of carrying their memory forward. Keanu felt his throat tighten. Her words touched something inside him that had been locked away. He had lived for years as though happiness was forbidden to him, as though moving forward meant forgetting. But now he wondered if maybe happiness could also be remembrance, living in a way that honored those he had lost. Later that afternoon, Sandra suggested something simple. Let's walk, she said. Just down the hall. Nothing more. Keanu hesitated. His body was still tired, his heart uncertain, but he saw the quiet encouragement in her eyes and he knew this was not about strength. It was about courage. So he agreed. She helped him out of bed, her hand steadying him as he placed his feet on the floor. The first step was shaky, the second no easier, but he kept moving. Each step felt like defiance against the shadows that had kept him down. As they walked slowly down the hall, the nurses smiled, watching quietly. Sandra stayed at his side, her presence firm but gentle. When he grew tired, she said softly, That's enough. You did it. One step is still a victory. Keanu leaned against the wall, breathing heavily, but in his heart something had shifted. It was not just about walking. It was about beginning. For the first time in years, he felt like he had taken a step toward life, toward healing, toward hope. That evening, when he lay back in bed, exhausted but calmer, he looked at Sandra and said quietly, Thank you. Not just for today, for reminding me that I can still move forward. Sandra smiled, her eyes glistening. You don't have to thank me. You did the hard part. You chose to take the step. In that moment, Keanu realized the truth. Healing was not about giant leaps. It was about small choices, one step at a time, made with courage and supported by someone who cared. The strength to live again days turned into weeks, and Keanu slowly grew stronger. The hospital became less of a prison and more of a place of renewal. Every morning, Sandra was there with her quiet smile, her calm words, and her steady presence. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they simply sat in silence, but each moment added another piece to the fragile bridge that carried him out of the darkness. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled into the room, Keanu sat by the window, his body upright and his mind clear in a way it had not been in years. Sandra sat across from him, watching him with quiet pride. "You've come so far," she said softly. Keanu shook his head gently. "Not far enough. I'm still afraid. I'm afraid of losing again. Afraid that the moment I open my heart, life will take it away like it always has." Sandra leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "Fear doesn't mean you stop living. Fear means you keep going even when it hurts. You've carried your grief with so much dignity, but you deserve more than survival. You deserve to live." Her words struck him like a truth he could no longer deny. He had spent years moving through life quietly, giving kindness to others while burying his own wounds. He had convinced himself that silence was strength, but now he saw that true strength was different. It was choosing to live fully, even with fear. It was choosing to let people in, even when loss had scarred him. Tears welled in his eyes as he whispered, "I don't know if I can." Sandra reached across and held his hand. "You don't have to know. You just have to try, one step at a time. And when you fall, you don't have to get up alone." Her words filled the room with a light that no machine or medicine could provide. Keanu felt his chest loosen, the old weight of silence slowly lifting. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future not built on emptiness, but on connection, on resilience, on hope. That evening, when the nurses left and the room grew quiet, Keanu turned to Sandra. His voice was calm, his tone steady. "When you walked into this room, I thought I was broken beyond repair. But you reminded me that broken is not the end. You reminded me that I can still live." Sandra smiled, her eyes shining. "You were never broken. You were just carrying too much alone." Keanu closed his eyes, letting the truth settle inside him. He knew the road ahead would not be easy. The grief would never fully disappear. But now he had something he had not felt in a long time. A reason to keep walking, not in silence but in strength. The hospital room, once a place of weakness, had become the place where he found the courage to begin again. And it began with one moment, one choice, one person walking through the door and refusing to let him face the shadows alone.